Hey everybody, welcome back for more live sound tips. For those of you who are new, have not been here before or watched my videos, my biggest concentration of information here is that I like to talk about the importance of sort of whatever your philosophy of the job happens to be, or telling what my philosophy about the job of being a live sound engineer happens to be, and trying to help you learn about the importance of the psychology side of the job, and learning about relationships and customer service and rapport building with people, because I think that stuff is really, really overlooked. There's plenty of people who make videos that are technical in nature. I will make some of those videos of my own at some point, just because there's a few random weird things that are topics that I find interesting. But for the most part right now, the main focus of this channel of Live Sound Tips is to talk about the stuff that nobody else is talking about, which is the psychology side of the job. So I realize that a lot of this advice is going to be best suited to people who are beginners or people that are sort of just getting their feet wet, getting started out in like bars and small clubs and that sort of thing. Good customer service skills and good relationship building skills can be applicable to people at all levels of the industry of live sound. It's just that most of the people who already know this stuff, it's because they know that stuff that they have elevated themselves and have worked their way up to the higher levels. Whereas the people who are doing the bar and small club circuit, if they don't learn this stuff and if they don't master certain skills and if they don't understand the psychology of dealing with performers and other people, then it keeps them trapped or sort of confined at this level. And then that's where you see a lot of the people who historically for many decades have just been like the people that are like those failed ex-musicians, and they're like the really bitter, angry, grumpy shitheads that just populate so many bars and small clubs all over the world, because I've met that guy 1,000 times everywhere I've gone. And so you don't want to become that person. So if you don't want to become that person, listen to what I have to say and take it very seriously and do what you can to put it into practice. Okay. With that whole disclaimer and all of that being said, I want to tell you the second story now. I told the previous story that was important and instrumental in how I really kind of got into my position here at the bottom of the hill, and the one particular night when something really sort of crystallized for me and came together in such a way that that the owners knew that I was somebody that they wanted to have as a regular on the team here, and somebody that they could really trust and count on to hit a home run when the time was here. So the second story that I want to tell, and it sort of overlaps a little bit with that story, is that it overlaps a little bit with that same time frame, is that I started working here in August of 2006, and basically between August of 2006 and then I became the head engineer beginning in April of 2007. But between August of 2006 and August of 2007, there was a band that had played here numerous times. And from the very first time I saw them, after a few months after I started working here, the band was called Street to Nowhere. And the primary songwriter and guitar player and lead singer of the band is a guy named Dave Smallin. Really great songwriter. All the people in the band, super cool people to work with. They were just always a pleasure to work with, and I really, really liked their music. So what was important was the fact that even when I was still just kind of a fill-in engineer who was only getting a few shifts a month here and there, I made a point that when I saw that this local band, Street to Nowhere, was playing again, because I really liked their music and liked my previous experience working with them, that I made a point of always requesting to be the engineer to work their shows whenever they happen to play. So within the span of a year, I probably mixed them here like 4 or 5 times. I would mix, sometimes Dave would play maybe opening for somebody else and he would just be playing solo, like him and an acoustic guitar. And then other times it might be that Street to Nowhere might headline a show, and then a few months later, maybe they would be in the support slot opening for a bigger headliner or something. But because I was, passionate about enjoying working with them and liking their music so much, the fact that I made a specific request to be able to work each time. And again, it didn't matter if Dave could be in the opening slot, and I might not even know who the support act and the headliner were, but I still would request because I wanted to work with people I liked to work with, because I think that's super, super important for keeping enthusiasm about what we do, and not always just saying, oh, I want to work when the big sold out shows are here, and I want to work when the big headliners are coming through, and that kind of thing. It's just anybody that I liked, if they were on the bill at any point, then I wanted to work with them. Now, because of that, it was around maybe August or September. I've been in the club for about a year, maybe a year and a month, when I was doing a Street to Nowhere show, and at the end of the night, I happened to throw on a CD by another musician that I really, really like a lot, a guy by the name of Jesse Mallon. And I'd been a big fan of his for about 10 or 11 years at that point, going all the way back to his previous band. Before he was a solo artist, he was in a great, criminally overlooked band, like really one of the best alternative rock bands of the 90s, called D-Generation out of New York. And I knew from that band that Jesse Mallon was a phenomenal songwriter. And so I'd been following his solo albums and stuff, and he had a new record out, and I put one of his CDs in at the end of the night after the Street to Nowhere show. So we're cleaning up the room, cleaning up the stage, everything. There's still a bunch of people in the bar and whatever. And after I put on the Jesse Mallon CD, a guy walks up to the booth and he says, hey, did you pick this out? Did you put on Jesse Mallon? And I was like, yeah, oh, you're a fan too. And we got to talking. And he's like, oh yeah, this new record's really great. And what ended up happening that came about of that from that conversation is he said, oh, well, by the way, whenever Street to Nowhere plays here, I always make a point of coming to I'm always at all of their local shows. And he said, I've noticed that the last several times that they've played here, you were always the engineer, and they've played here prior to, like, which would have been before I was working here. And he said, and you've always made them sound like really, really great, and you stood out as somebody that I noticed doing an awesome job whenever they would play here. And so I was like really flattered. No, thanks, that's great, that's really cool. And we're talking a little bit more, and then eventually the conversation comes around to where he then explains, well, the reason I'm always at all of their shows is because I'm the day-to-day guy at their management company. So I'm one of their managers who handles them on a regular, like everything that they're doing on a regular basis. And then he says, and by the way, we have this other band, this indie rock band that's local. They're like based over in Oakland. This band called Rogue Wave. And Rogue Wave has this like really hotly anticipated new album. It's about to drop, and they're going to be going out on tour. And they need a tour manager and front of house engineer. So do you do touring work? And I said, absolutely, of course I do. I was like, that sounds great. I was like, jumped at the opportunity. And he said, well, give me your phone number. And so we talked a little bit more, and this was like on a Friday night. And then Monday morning, he calls me from the office at Zeitgeist Management, and we have a discussion, and we talk about like the needs of the job and everything. And over the weekend, I like checked out the band and listened to a bunch of their music and stuff. And so then that ended up turning into a touring gig. And I think that's an important story to tell, because it's another one of those things where I think every show is important. Like I'm always, again, want to always emphasize this idea that how you do anything is how you do everything. And that I'm really only, when I'm passionate about something like pro audio and live sound, I only have one speed, and that's like, that gear is basically like, the engine goes 100% of the time, and I don't really, it's either on or off. And I don't really, I'm not really the kind of person who's geared in a way where I'm ever gonna like half-ass it or something. If something doesn't mean something to me, then I just don't do it, period. I'm just not gonna have the enthusiasm for it at all. But because I tackle everything with 100% intensity, and I wanna do things in that manner, it's relevant because, again, like there are all of these pieces that came together that had to do with me like saying, oh man, this is a really great local band. I'll mix them anytime they play here, whether it's the opening slot or the middle slot or the headlining slot or whatever, just because I enjoyed their music and I enjoyed working with them as people. And then putting on, an appropriate CD of similar music that was relevant, but it was also somebody who, Jesse Mallon, was relatively obscure, and not a lot of people would have actually known who he was, but this guy happened to know. And that led to a conversation, which led to him then acknowledging the quality of the work that I had always done whenever I had mixed Street to Nowhere. So there's a whole bunch of things that happened there. And it's important because none of that is like luck. And a lot of people will want to chalk things up to saying, oh, well, that person got that job because they were lucky, or that person, they just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But I am definitely a believer that we create our own luck, and that when people say like, oh, that person got lucky or they were in the right place at the right time, they're just making excuses for themselves for not wanting to be, they just don't want to work hard enough. That's the bottom line. They just don't want to put in the work, and they'd rather have a convenient fallback story or excuse that they can use for why other people are succeeding and getting further than they are, particularly in live sound, where again, like you have so many people that just end up being failed, bitter engineers who aren't going anywhere in their career. And it's not because someone else got lucky, it's because other people worked harder, they treated people better, and they just had a better overall work ethic, and they had a better overall attitude and philosophy towards their job. So the point of that story is just that I want you to understand that there were multiple things involved over the course of about a year, like I said, 12 or 13 months of time from when I started here to when and well, here's the other funny part about it too. I never ended up touring with Streets of Nowhere. I think maybe within about a year or so after that, like they had broken up, and I would still do solo shows that Dave would play every once in a while here at the bottom of the hill for the next few years. But it was my passion and my desire to work with that band just because I liked them that opened other doors for me that I never even thought about and hadn't even like intended, like those weren't even really like the goal necessarily. So then this conversation with Streets of Nowhere's manager ends up being something where it leads to me getting other gigs. So then that gig with Rogue Wave, and there's stories within that I could tell you where that gig led to my gig with Matt Nathanson. And my gig with Matt Nathanson was the thing that got me out mixing even bigger and bigger shows every night. So there's a progression of a lot of logical steps in all of this very long-winded, rambling story of mine. But the point being that your work ethic matters, and your passion for the job matters, and how you treat people really, really matters. Like I said, how you do anything is how you do everything. So don't get in the habit of just doing things in a half-assed nature, because then you will have to count on so-called luck. You will have to count on getting lucky and hoping that you're in the right place at the right time. And I'm, not one, as a guy who started doing live sound at the age of 35, it kind of lit a fire under my ass. It was either do this or go back to working the shitty menial labor jobs that you get when you have nothing more than a high school diploma and you've got tattoos on your fingers. So, that's not really much of a future for somebody. And that's why from the age of 35, I was able to go from mixing for 20 people a night to 20,000 people in 3 years' time. So pay attention again to all of these little stories and little snippets of my life and my career, because again, like this stuff, it's not, I'm talking about who I mixed for or who I toured with or whatever is not meant to be impressive. It's meant to impress upon you an idea and to inspire you to realize that there are much higher levels that you can go to that you're probably not even thinking about yet, but you need to be making the right impression on people all the time, because you never really know who's watching, and I have some very important stories about that, about how you never know who's watching. So that's it. I will talk to you all later. Bye.